Time for the private member's motion. I call the member from Maroochydore.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I move this House directs the Committee of the Legislative Assembly to 1. Inquire into the Legislative Assembly's functions, scrutinise the government's financial proposals expenditure, b. the transparency, efficiency and efficacy of the Portfolio Committee's estimates process, and c. whether the Legislative Assembly's scrutiny of government's financial proposals and its Portfolio Committee estimates process benchmarks well against other parliaments in Australia, New Zealand and other comparable democratic systems to ensure that the Legislative Assembly's scrutiny of financial proposals and expenditure is modern and appropriate to needs. 2. The committee should specifically consider measures such as a. increasing the time available for questioning to ensure an appropriate examination of both past and future expenditure can occur, b. appointing the Speaker, Deputy Speaker, an opposition or crossbench member to chair the committees to ensure bipartisan oversight, c. broadening the hearing program to avoid artificially limiting time for certain portfolios, d. increasing the ranks of the officials who may be directly questioned by the committee, and e. any other matter the committee considers necessary. 3. The committee is to report to the Legislative Assembly with any recommended enhancements by 1 May 2021. The parliamentary budget estimates process is broken and it must be reformed. After one of the worst abuses of power and process I have seen by government members seeking to protect and block questions.
Order, members.
To protect and block questions to ministers, which competent ministers should have no problem in fronting up to and answering. It was a complete protection racket, it was an overreach and it was an abuse of power. Budget estimates is the one time in the year when parliamentarians who are not part of the executive should have the opportunity to ask questions of ministers and their departments and statutory officers about their budget and administration of that budget in greater detail. It is the only time when statutory office bearers and departmental officials are able to front a committee where members of this House who aren't members of the executive,
you're on the speaking list.
And
You'll
if
get
the
your
minister
turn.
knows anything about parliamentary process and respects it, he knows that the budget estimates process did go through a reform process a number of years ago. And what's really disappointing is to see what happened this financial year, where the intentions and I believe the actions of that process have now been thrown out the window. There was an understanding that you should be allowed to have free-flowing questions and to have ministers answer those questions, that it shouldn't be stilted by chairs interrupting and trying to control and even repeating questions and counting down, wasting time on the clock and rephrasing questions. We also saw backbench government members with frivolous interjections, repeatedly interjecting and also wasting precious time on the clock. And this process is one where there is an opportunity for us to seek to have the highest benchmarks, a time to look at other jurisdictions where it is done better, to look at what is the better way, particularly for a unicameral parliament, to have a parliamentary estimates process that allows that questioning to take part. You see, when you have a unicameral parliament in particular, the committee process has to be stronger and provide more opportunities for non-government members and non-executive members to be able to ask questions of the government. But this year it was an absolute joke in the way some of the government members behaved. It was so blatant and ham-fisted that even to casual observers who don't live within the parliamentary bubble of understanding the rules of parliament would look and say, that's ridiculous. Why can't you ask those questions? Why are they wasting time? And that's why we've put forward a motion that is about a bipartisan way to allow the crossbenchers as well to have a voice, to allow us to have the estimates process benchmarked against better and higher standards. Let's look at who's doing it best, but particularly in a unicameral parliament, why this is so important. The estimates process is already very time-constrained. So people running down the clock and interrupting, you don't have the opportunity realistically to go offline and to press back against those rules. It's time for reform. This is a very reasonable way of achieving that. That's why we are moving this motion today.